Hello. Today I'm gonna be featuring the US Tier 10 cruiser, the Des Moines. Now, interestingly, this is actually a recent game that made me change the spec that I'm using on the Des Moines. Not a large change, but a change regardless. You see, in this build I'm actually still using RPF and I quite enjoyed it, but I ate such a frustratingly stupid pair of torpedoes in this game that I decided, nope, I want vigilance. I hate not having vigilance on cruisers that don't, on cruises that I want to push in, cruisers I want to play aggressive in, and of course the Des Moines is a good example of a cruiser I want to play aggressive in. And while RPF is good for pointing out from which direction these torpedoes might come, of course I never recommend using both vigilance and RPF because they kind of overlap in that sense. You use RPF to get an idea where the torps are coming from, and then you angle and you prepare for them to come from that direction. That's the whole point of using RPF instead of vigilance. However, in this case, because of the awkward angle, RPF simply couldn't compensate for things that vigilance could have given me. Also, I made some changes to a captain as well, since I started using Steven Seagal on Des Moines, but I'll get more into that later. First of all, I'm pushing in. I tell the DDs in front of me to please scout for me, because, well, they're not scouting, which is of course a problem. If you got cruiser support like these guys do, they're Akizuki and Benson, if they got cruiser support like me here, they should be pushing in and making use of that cruiser support. I give a bit more broadside here than usual because, well, I want to use my back guns to get as many volleys off as possible before he starts shooting. As soon as he starts shooting, I of course turn in because you need to angle against Minotaurs or they will melt you. He smokes up, so I counter it with radar. Of course, one of the reasons why US cruisers kind of shit on Royal Navy is because, well, radar forces them to move out of their smoke, and once they're in the open, well, then you got all sorts of advantages. He has to sneak few torps, and here you get an example. You see, these two torps are gonna take me on the nose, two gearing torps on the nose, and with vigilance I would have probably been able to dodge those, but without vigilance I had no chance, and that's of course quite annoying. Amusingly, my secondary skill of the Minotaur is close quarters expert in a Des Moines versus a Minotaur. It's quite interesting, and I get the kill. However, I am forced to use my repair here, and there is a Bismarck pushing in. The issue with having to use my repair was of course the flooding caused by the torps, and the Ibuki is now a huge threat. If he gets fires on me, they will be permanent, so I focus on spamming AP on him to basically force him to evade and not be able to focus as heavily on shooting me. Now I stop shooting though, because he's far enough away, the gearing is smoked up. The Bismarck is in the smoke, but the Bismarck cannot spot me unless he leaves the smoke. That's the whole idea of stopping this shooting. So if this Bismarck wants to deal damage to me, once I get undetected, he has to move out of the smoke. Hence why I stopped shooting earlier, because I did not want the Bismarck to be able to park inside that smoke and be able to use the Minotaur smoke against me, because I would have no chance against a smoked up battleship. So by stopping shooting there for a second, I allow my superior concealment to hide me, and that forces the Bismarck to leave the smoke in order to engage me. And now that he's left the smoke, well, now I feel much more comfortable taking him on. Of course I angle, I show a fairly large amount of broadside. That's of course because I want to bait him into shooting towards my citadel, which is the most armored part of the ship. As long as it's angled, of course, you can easily bounce shells, but you don't want to angle straight towards battleships because they tend to wreck you quite hard, so I make sure to keep an angle towards him at all times. The Ibuki is still somewhere in the back, but he's no longer as much of a threat as this guy, especially now since I have my repair up again. The Bismarck of course made a huge mistake. He repaired my earlier fire. When you repair a first fire, something I'd never recommend, but especially doing it against when he knows there's DDs here, and when a Des Moines is spamming him. Well, as you can see, multiple fires on him. He is cooking quite nicely. There's torps coming in, which you should be expecting, honestly. Especially when you're facing DDs, you kind of want to be really careful with that repair. Even if you have two fires on you, if you expect there's torps coming in, hold on to that repair. Yes, you might eat some additional fire damage while you wait and while you hold on to it, but you won't get hit by a flooding that you can't repair, because getting hit by a flooding you can't repair is in most cases a death sentence, especially if you're still in combat, because not only does it slow you down, it's that constant HP drain which is incredibly frustrating. And usually when people see someone who's flooding and taking damage, then they focus even more on him, and it's just a nasty spiral, and you don't want to get caught in it. So when you're facing DDs, rather take some additional fire damage in the form of like 2 fires, and wait out the torps before you blow that repair. Fire damage is after all light damage, so you can all heal it up. Ibuki, I don't really care about his angling and turning and such. I stick to AP because, well, Des Moines AP is of course very heavy, high penetration values. As long as I hit, I'll probably be able to do damage. As you can see, really weird angles, citadels and such. Well, that's of course because the shells are super heavy, which means that I am able to citadel him from the weirdest possible angles. And he is maneuvering a lot, but I'm of course consistently closing the distance because, well, the closer I get, the more deadly I get in this ship in general. We have gotten a pretty good advantage down here though. We managed to kill them off here and managed to get the cap. Even the gearing got killed by the DDs. Of course, they got a bit of an advantage when I radared the Minotaur. I also of course radared the gearing for them, which helped them out quite a bit. And yeah, well, he's hugging the border now, which makes it a bit awkward to hit him since he hasn't suffered slowdown that you get from reduced engine speed yet. So he's still fairly maneuverable. Now he's getting the slowdown though, and now he becomes very easy to hit. Oh, wow! He shatters the shells awkwardly with the front of his ship, so I don't even get the kill. Regardless, of course, this ship is bound for a buff. It's going to get a half a second reload buff on 0.6.1. That's already on the PTS, as I recently covered. But honestly, it's not going to change the gameplay of the ship in any way. It's not going to change anything. I used range mod for situations like this. Now, that's the kind of shots that are very unlikely to hit. That was what, an 18.2 km volley. You see how long it takes for the shells to travel. But super heavy AP means you can still citadel Kutuzovs from absolutely insane distances. But overall, I tried running reload mode on the PTS, where you have already faster reload. Instead of 6-second reload, you have 5.5 second, and you drop it down to 4.8 by using the reload mode. But ultimately, it still isn't worth it. I mean, the only thing you're doing is increasing something that's already very strong, which is your close range DPM. But when you get these passive standard battles, or in general very slow-paced games, trying to use the reload mod is just not worth it. So ultimately, I'll still be using the identical build, and I will still be using the range mod when 0.6.1 hits. I don't think it's going to change anything in the way the Des Moines is played. The half a second buff really isn't that big. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but ultimately it means that in a minute you can like launch one more volley than you could otherwise. So a very slight DPS increase, yay! But when you already have such a fast reload, it doesn't really affect it that much, compared to the Baltimore, of course, which gains a massive buff. Pushing in fairly aggressively here, I got my heal up, I got my repair up, they're all far away. If I want to disengage, if I get some unlucky citadel, I can pretty easily do that. Friedrich de Grosse angles away, so I start working on the hipper. And honestly, well, there's DD, but he's caught inside B. He's probably gonna get killed sooner or later. Do I want to shoot the Friedrich de Grosse, or do I want to shoot the hipper at this point? It's kind of either one. Switching off to the Friedrich de Grosse here. I think they almost collided there. And of course, just hammering HE, since I think he used his repair earlier. It's a really common thing these days for battleships, for some reason, repair the first fire. It's extremely stupid, but whatever. If they want to do it, then do it. Oh, this Benson actually offered smoke me up in chat, but I completely missed it. He does smoke me up now, so I give him a thank you. I mean, I didn't really strictly need it, because I was still able to disengage at any point I wanted, but this makes dealing damage to these guys significantly safer, of course, when you got a friendly teammate, especially USDD, that smokes you up, since the smoke duration is so massive on those. So I'm gonna drop him a compliment after the game, because of course this makes life a lot easier for me, and it pretty much makes it impossible for them to push into this cap at this point. Pushing into a smoked up Des Moines without any way to radar him is so hard, because the closer you get, the more damage you eat, and the DPM, even if you're a battleship and you're angled, the HE DPM just adds up to such incredible numbers that it just not worth it. So they're already starting to turn away. Hipper gives broadside finally, which I was waiting for. I do get a citadel, but I don't get the kill again. That seems to be the story of this game. Not really able to secure these kills as much as I want. Maybe it's karma for that ridiculous Kutuzov citadel earlier. It's possible. Other than that, of course, this build uses Superintendent. You have so many consumables that benefit from it. You have especially the radar and the heal are, of course, the two important ones. Concealment Expert, of course, for those moments when you want to disappear. For example, against the Bismarck, I disappeared from vision. It has infinite uses for survivability. It's a fantastic perk. I use Adrenaline Rush instead of Expert Marksman, because this ship doesn't need Expert Marksman. Without Expert Marksman, you have something like 30-second turret traverse, 180 degrees, and if you use Expert Marksman, you can drop it to something like 26, 27. It's something around 3 seconds. So ultimately, saving 3 seconds on a complete 180-degree turn for your turrets is not really worth it. And now, okay, this guy's kind of annoying me, this battleship on my left, because you see, ultimately I'd like to sail towards the Friedrich der Grosse and use all 3 guns on the Bismarck, but this Tirpitz now blocked my path, so I can't turn to the left and bring all my guns to bear. So I'm actually going to have to turn my turrets around and basically turn to the right to be able to use all 3 of my guns, which is a bit awkward. And because, well, this Tirpitz doesn't understand that there are multiple battleships there. You see, this is a bit of tunnel vision. He only focuses on the one battleship, not taking into account that there are 2 of them. And when this guy dies, the other guy has probably gonna create a lot of distance and will be quite hard for us to catch. But he leaves me with no options since I want to use all my guns. He finally turns away, but I've already turned my guns around, so whatever. At this point, it's pretty much too late. He's kind of forced me into this path. Through lack of his awareness. That's pretty common though, battleships tend to tunnel vision quite a bit. Honestly, that's a bit rude. All ships tend to tunnel vision, but especially battleships for some reason tend to really love staring down the sights, waiting for the guns to reload. Whereas usually they are the ones who should have the best map awareness, because every time the guns reload you should zoom out and take in your surroundings, whereas guns like the Des Moines cause a lot of tunnel vision because you're staring down the sights so much. But for some reason that's not really how it works in this game. What else about the build? Well, as I've said, I've changed some things. I'm using RPF right now, but I'm changing away for it because I really want that additional buffer from Vigilance so I don't eat those silly torps that could have ended this game quite quickly. I ate 2 torps. Had I gotten Ebook, if the rookie had aimed better and been a bit more aggressive, he could have maybe burned me down there, because having no repairs and a far starter like the Ibuki focusing you from long range is quite rough in general. So that's one thing I've gotten. Of course, I have target priority on this ship. That's something I use, or priority target I think it's called. That's something I like on pretty much all my high tier cruisers because it's so much useful information. You get advanced warning when people are targeting you. Most people don't understand to work around it. Like usually if I want to shoot a cruiser in a battleship these days, I first turn my guns, but I make sure to keep someone else a target, and then I click target on the cruiser and then I shoot to give him as little warning as possible. But most battleships won't do that. They'll just target you and give you the warning that you need. Anyway, the game ends there. That last guy got away as expected because I was forced out of position by the Tirpitz, but ultimately a 221,000 damage game, Confederate high caliber, well, the first blood, only 9 citadels, but hey, I'll take it. It was a overall pretty damn good game, considering it was quite short as well. Looking at the team score, 2.5k base XP, that's always nice, and well, the Friedrich der Grosse was their only survivor who fled. I really don't understand why they flee, considering you don't pay any repair costs anymore, but I'll take it. Moving on to detailed report, of course, it was a 14-minute game. Most of the damage came from AP, but honestly, I almost got a Witherer worth. It's fairly balanced, to be honest. Well, HE only did 64k damage, but Fires almost did a full Witherer worth, 57k, very close to the Witherer. So fairly balanced overall, and that kind of sums up the Des Moines. It's very balanced. It doesn't matter if you're shooting HE or AP, both of them do terrifying amounts of damage. And damage taken, 44k. The 2 torps, probably a pretty huge chunk of that. Potential damage only 1.1 million, so not that much. Anyway, let's move on to my new recommended build for this ship. Right, starting off, let's go to the consumables. Priority wise, if you can afford it, buy the premium repair, and then once again, if you can afford it, next order priority is repair party, followed by radar. Please don't use the spotting planes or fighter planes. I've actually seen the Moines who do that. Finally, defensive AA, but that's the least important since you won't be able to use it much. Main armaments mod, you lose your turrets quite a bit. They are quite squishy on this ship. AA guns mod, by far the most important one here. None of the others are really worth it, and you want that great range. Gunfire control system 2. There's only two options here, reload or range, that are worth using, and the reload simply isn't worth it. I mean, you might get away with using the reload if you're constantly in a division and you get people to smoke up for you that let you always close the distance and such things. But ultimately, range mod gives you far more versatility against people fleeing, people camping, like battleships sitting somewhere bow in. You can actually stealth fire them. Damage control system 1 and 2. I actually use damage control system 2 instead of rudder shift on the Des Moines. It's one of the few cruisers where I do this. And that's of course because the default rudder shift is so good that I feel that I can get away with using it on this ship. And especially since when you're angled you tend to eat quite a lot of HE spam, especially from DDs who just love spamming you, so reducing the fires is nice. Concealment system, of course, by far the most valuable one here, especially since you can sneak up with your radar. Now we get to the captain perks, and then here it gets a bit interesting. First of all, I have 3 tier 1 perks. Well, as you can see, I've given up RPF, that's the change. I've given up RPF for Vigilance and Expert Loader. That's the changes I made to this build. First of all, Priority Target, Preventive Maintenance, once again you lose those turrets a lot. Expert Loader, note that I have Steven Seagal on this captain, so it's minus 75% instead of the usual minus 50%. And that of course means that I can switch shell type in 1.5 seconds on the ship. Well, once the 0.6.1 hits, it's going to be even less, but still I can shift shell types in 1.5 seconds, which means whenever someone pops up and gives me broadside or something, it only takes me, basically the time it takes for my turrets to turn, I already have my shell type loaded. Adrenaline Rush, Expert Marksman, I don't need it. Once again, it's slightly better on Steven Seagal than it is on normal captains, but you don't need it on this ship. Superintendent, Vigilance, AFT, and finally Concealment Expert. If this was a new captain I was leveling, well, I would go with Priority Target first. Now, if this was any other captain, any other US captain, you might need Expert Marksman, but on the Des Moines, you don't need it, so I'm just gonna talk over a specific Des Moines captain. So we start with Priority Target, and then we move on Adrenaline Rush afterwards. Superintendent, followed by Concealment Expert, followed by AFT. You want that massive AA bubble. It's so good for denying any sort of spotting or strike capability. Vigilance finally, followed by Preventive Maintenance with your 18th point, and finally Expert Loader with your 19th point. And well, this kind of captain, it wouldn't, of course, if you don't have Steven Seagal, this kind of build isn't as valuable, but it will still work just fine. But with Steven Seagal and the 75% ammo switch thing, it really becomes nasty. Anyway, that was my Des Moines commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.